for your lab practical, you're going to need to know two different types of brain models. So the first one over here, sitting in this lovely piece of pottery, that's a So-So brand brain model. It's going to show all sorts of different features. It can stand alone. You'll find them on the center desk found in the lab. And the other model right over here, this one actually comes from our small mannequin models. So you know the models at the back of the room, they look like a head and torso, and they show all sorts of different systems. Well, this brain comes from that model. I call it our squishy model because it squishes, and you'll need to know this model for a few features that you wouldn't find, or that would be harder to find on this one. To start off our discussion of the human brain models, I'm going to review all of the cranial nerves that you'll need to know for your practical. So we're going to start from the top down, and let's get started with number 29. It's kind of hard to see, but number 29, that's the olfactory bulb, and you can see the olfactory tract right here. So that's cranial nerve number 1, the olfactory nerve. Number 30 right here, again, not the easiest to see, but 30, that is cranial nerve number 2, the optic nerve. You actually can't see the optic chiasma on this model, but just kind of pretend that there isn't this big gap right there, and that there's a nice little connecting piece right there, and that would be the optic chiasma. Cranial nerve number 3 is labeled 32 on this model. I might need to take this out. Yes. So we have cranial nerve number 3, the oculomotor nerve, and that's the nerve that moves most of your eye muscles. And here it is. You can see it on the side. It's a little bit hidden when we put it all together. It's hidden down in there. Cranial nerve number 4, the trochlear nerve, which is the nerve that moves the superior oblique eye muscle. That is labeled number 33, and you can see it. It's this teeny tiny one right there. It's labeled number 33, and it's this small one and that small one right there. Then we have the trigeminal nerve, and on the diagrams that I sent out and on your sheep brains, it was actually pretty big and pretty obvious, but here on this model, for some reason, they've made it kind of small. So it's labeled number 34. This is cranial nerve number 5, trigeminal nerve, but it's right here. You can always tell that it's the trigeminal because it would be on the pons, and it's kind of off to the side on its own right here. So there's the trigeminal, and here's the other trigeminal. Cranial nerve number 6 is labeled 35, and you can see it right here. This is the abducens nerve, and it moves the lateral rectus eye muscle. Number 36 on this model, which you can see right here, that is 36, isn't it? Yeah, 36 right there, and this one right there. That is cranial nerve number 7, which is the facial nerve. So it moves a lot of the muscles that we have in our face. The vestibulocochlear nerve is found just lateral to it. It's labeled number 37, but it's cranial nerve number 8. So it innervates the vestibule and the cochlea found in that inner ear. Cranial nerve number 9 is labeled 38, here it is. That is our glossopharyngeal nerve, and it innervates the back of your tongue and your pharynx. 39 on the model is cranial nerve number 10, the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve, basically it's just like the wandering nerve. Think of like vagabond wandering around Vegas, not Las Vegas, but this will wander off to your heart and to your lungs, your digestive tract. It's going to go all throughout your body. Then we go to cranial nerve number 11, the spinal accessory nerve, and that's labeled 42 on this model, so it's kind of defying logic with its numbering on this guy, but this is cranial nerve number 11, that spinal accessory nerve. 41, labeled right here, that is your hypoglossal nerve. It's cranial nerve number 12, and that is going to innervate the anterior section of your tongue. So glossal is for tongue, so the glossopharyngeal and the hypoglossal both innervate the tongue, but just different regions of it. So here in section A, or labeled section A, this would be considered our cerebrum. It has different lobes of the cerebrum that I'm going to show you down here. To start off, right down here, that's going to be obviously our temporal lobe. We have our frontal lobe right up the front. We have our occipital lobe back here, and then we of course have our parietal lobes. So one right here and one would be on the other side as well. But those are the different lobes of the brain. I'm going to flip this guy around, and we'll keep going with the cerebrum. One of the, or two of the features that you're going to need to know are gyri and sulci. We've heard of sulci before. Sulci and gyri are plural. Gyri means ridges and sulci means grooves. So all of these ridges of the brain, like here and all over the place, all of these like folded ridges, those are gyri. And then sulci would be the grooves found in between. So here's a sulci, there's a sulci. So we're still here in the cerebrum. Number one, this structure right here, it might look like it's part of that diencephalon region, but it's still considered to be part of the cerebrum. So this is our corpus callosum, right here, number one. Labeled R over here, this section in there, that's the septum pellucidum. And 6, this structure right there, labeled 6, that is the fornix. A structure that you cannot see but need to know are the lateral ventricles, and these ventricles would just be cavities inside of our two hemispheres of the cerebrum. Now we've moved on to the cerebellum, not to be confused with the cerebrum. So this structure right here, labeled B, that is the cerebellum. It's comprised of two hemispheres, which you can see here, that are connected by structure 8. You can see the label right there, structure 8, which is the vermis. So that vermis acts as like a solid mass that connects these two hemispheres. You'll notice all of these like folds and ridges and little grooves out here on the cerebellum, and those are called folia and fissures. Kind of similar to the gyri and the sulci of the cerebrum, the cerebellum has folia, which would be those folded over ridges, and then fissures, which would be the grooves found in here. So there are tons and tons and tons of examples all over the cerebellum. The last structure from the cerebellum that you'll want to know is right here. It's labeled 7 right here, and that is the arbor vitae. It means tree of life, and if you look at it, it really does look like a tree. I mean, it's actually quite pretty. But labeled 7 right here, that is our arbor vitae. Now we're in the midbrain, which is labeled C on this model. So this right in here is our midbrain region. You can see that the cerebral aqueduct runs through it, and you can see this solid mass right here and some masses right there. So I specifically want to point out the corpora quadrigemina. So that long name just means twin bodies. I'm going to get a little bit closer so you can see them better. These right here are collectively referred to as the corpora quadrigemina. We have the superior colliculus right here, and we have an inferior colliculus right there. And we say colliculus for singular, we say colliculi for plural. If you had both hemispheres of the brain together, there would be 4 little lumps. 1 lump, 2 lump, a third, and a fourth. Labeled D on this model, you'll find the pons. So you don't actually have any structures to learn for the pons. It's a pretty straightforward feature. So we're going to take a minute and point out the ventricles of the brain. I do a little tutorial over the ventricle model at the end of this tutorial, but I want to point out where they would be in reference to all of the brain matter around those. So again, ventricles are just going to be these cavities or spaces where cerebrospinal fluid would be found. So the first two ventricles, which are our lateral ventricles, they would be housed in our cerebrum in the two hemispheres. I know I pointed that out before, but we'll just say it again for good measure. The third ventricle is going to be found in and around the thalamus. The thalamus actually has two halves to it. So here's one half, and you can imagine the other half in the other hemisphere. And it actually surrounds and encloses that third ventricle. Something that I want to point out is that the third ventricle, which you can kind of see right here, they've tried to show it. You can't see the entire structure, but here's 3. You can also see that it has a choroid plexus, and that choroid plexus is what's going to be secreting cerebrospinal fluid. Moving down, so there's our third ventricle, moving down right through here, this is our cerebral aqueduct. So this is going to run through that midbrain section, which is found right here. The midbrain is right above the pons, and it's below the diencephalon region. So here's our midbrain. So the cerebral aqueduct runs through it, and you see a name or a name of a feature listed in your lab manual called the cerebral peduncles. This right here, that is the cerebral peduncles, or is part of it. Basically, these cerebral peduncles are just long, thick tracts of, I forget if it's white or gray matter, but it's basically brain tissue or nervous tissue. And so it's running up here, and it forms the floor of that cerebral aqueduct. So we have our corpora quadrigemina right up here. You could say that that's like the roof of the cerebral aqueduct, and then you have your cerebral peduncles, which form the floor of the cerebral aqueduct. So there's that cerebral aqueduct coming down to the fourth ventricle, which is found between the pons and the arbor vitae. This structure, you can't see it, and I can't really show you the labels for it, but inside of here, there would be another one of those choroid plexuses where more of that cerebrospinal fluid would be secreted. Strangely enough, on this brain, our medulla oblongata isn't technically labeled like all of the other major regions, but this region right in here would be our medulla oblongata. There's no letter for it. But running from that medulla oblongata, we come down to what's labeled E, and that's the beginning of our spinal cord. So just imagine this extends all the way down your spine, and remember that there is a central canal that runs through that spinal cord. So again, spinal cord is labeled E, and this area right here is the medulla oblongata.